All right, we're back, and it's COMP213 Web Interface Design, and it's Week 10, Lesson 10, Part 1. And I want to do a couple things today with you. This week, again, we're going to do forms, but we want to kind of finish up that responsive web design stuff that we kind of started with by using that first tag, that meta tag. Let's talk about responsive web design a little bit and what I'm saying. So Week 8, we had 3 parts to Week 8. That's what I was asked to do, right? Part 1 and 2 came from chapters 6 and 7. And part 3 came, part of part 3, we're going to do a little bit of chapter 8, right? And then we're going to get finally to chapter 10 this week with forms, right? So let's take a look at this chapter 3 stuff, or chapter 8 stuff. So chapter 8, what they're talking about here is, let's go back into mobile web design best practices. Okay, so now this doesn't talk about responsive design necessarily. This just talks about mobile web design stuff, right? So one of the things to think about is when you're building a site for mobile, some approaches are, hey, let's build a .mobi site, right? Which means like get another site. Let's say your site's called example.com, and now your site's called example.mobi, M-O-B-I, and then that gives you like, you know, and it kind of junts someone over to a site that's purely for mobile. Don't recommend that one, that approach. I know some people do that. Like, for example, they might have their own custom site for mobile. The other one would be a separate website hosted, as an example, within your domain, a subdomain. So let's say m.example.com, right? M being mobile. Or mobile.example.com. Your subdomain is mobile, right? And then the third option is the stuff we're doing today, which is using CSS and CSS media queries, right, to kind of detect the type of viewport that's being used and adjust your site according to the viewport. Okay, so that's one of those. These are the kind of strategies. When we talk about mobile web limitations, these are the ones that used to exist. Small screen size. Well, yeah, there's some devices that are small, but nowadays you got tablet devices that are pretty large. And other kinds of devices. So I don't think small screen size. I think the best way to describe this nowadays, this phenomenon that's going on with mobile and handheld, is various screen sizes that you're hitting. It's not just small, just some medium as well. Low bandwidth, again, if you're, maybe in the past we were talking about low bandwidth. Nowadays most modern providers, they hit us with pretty good bandwidth for most modern phones. You can get pretty good download speed, so I don't think that's much of an issue, as much anymore anyway. They're still not as fast as being on example on Wi-Fi, but for most cellular phones, they're pretty good. Even the bandwidth's not bad. Limited fonts and colors, not really true. You can pretty much use everything you can nowadays on most modern browsers, even if they're on mobile. Awkward controls, well, definitely you're touching, right? So touchscreens, still, for most of us, we still haven't really got a handle on the best way to use touch devices. I even think that, you know, they talk about how Apple and other manufacturers make tablets and how things have slid, you know, in terms of sales for tablets. But part of that is the why we use tablets. Like we try and use tablets like we use, you know, laptops, and that's not really a good user story, right? Our laptops have a keyboard. Tablets do not have a keyboard, and yet we program tablets like they do, right? So I think that's, you know, some of the things we have to get around. We're still not quite there with touch yet. Limited processor and memory. Yeah, definitely there's a little bit of a processor gap in terms of performance from a mobile or handheld device with desktop, but that gap is coming closer and closer as you know, you have slimmer programs, so you don't have as much. You don't see this as much anymore in terms of web anyway. So design techniques for mobile. One of the ideas is one column design, like a single page layout. As an example, we scroll continuously. That's very, very popular these days. Avoiding floats and tables and frames. I know some people do navigation with floats, right? So they do kind of like a, you know, horizontal nav with floats. I personally don't like that style anyway. I like using showing and hiding the display. That's it just makes more sense for me. And The other thing you have to think about is when it comes to stuff that works with desktop, like hover. Hover doesn't work on mobile. So trying to use the hover pseudo class with mobile, it's useless. You have to kind of say, well, you're never going to hover. Descriptive page title and and heading tags and all that kind of stuff. I think that's really any kind of, when we say descriptive, I think semantic HTML, when you think about true semantic HTML is creating your page layout, your structure in a semantic fashion, it's a descriptive way, right? Optimizing images, definitely something we want to do. The worst thing is when you have a very small image, you know, as an example that is on mobile, and then you view it on a larger page if it's not optimized and it's pixelated. And the other way is even worse. You have a huge image that works nicely on desktop. She's got problems with power, right? And then, you know, as an example, you try and shrink it down for mobile. It shrinks down, but you still got that massive image. It's still the massive image that's been shrunk down. You still got to load up that image. So sometimes what we want to do is when we you know, we have two different sets of images that we load. You know, when we move from desktop to mobile to make it more responsive. And also, not just, it says here, eliminate unneeded images. Not just unneeded images when it comes to mobile, but also unneeded content. You know, sometimes we have stuff on mobile that makes no sense. Like, why would I put a GitHub link on my mobile site? You can't do anything with it. You can't look at code really on your phone, right? Unless you have something like a tablet or higher, you don't need something, you know, stuff that like a GitHub link. And there's other things like that. There might be some videos. You know, you're not going to show big picture video on a mobile screen. Typically, you're not going to do that on a background video. There's things that you're going to stop doing. It's not that can you do it. Again, it's that whole the idea of should you do it? Should I put it on mobile? If it doesn't belong here, why am I putting it on there? Just because I have the links on desktop doesn't mean I have to put every single link that I have on my desktop on mobile. Maybe I have to select the ones that are the most important. And then when you go to that, when you say, well, if these are the most important and these other links are not important, why do I even have these links in the first place, right? Kind of get you to rethink your design. Navigation and lists, definitely something we're going to be doing. And skip to content, hyperlink. Why do we have this skip to content hyperlink? What is it for? For screen readers, right? Skip to content is usually what we use to, if you want to support accessibility standards, we use skip to content, right? So it's not visible from a you know, a desktop perspective or even mobile, but you know, screen readers can actually hear the fact that there's a big section on navigation, and we just want to skip to the content, right? So you want to definitely have that in. Back to top, if you have a long scrolling site, sometimes instead of you know, scrolling your you know, or touching your and dragging your screen around until you get to the top or the bottom, that's not good. That's not a good story. You want to be able to click a button or some kind of link, some kind of thing on your nav bar that takes you to the top again. One thing that's missing from here, from a user story perspective, is something like this. What about if I have from, you know, when I click on you know, the device, I go to a mobile site, and you know what? Something's missing that I want to get to, right? Then there should be this, you know, view full site link as well. I should be able to go to the full site link from my mobile. So those are the kind of the things that we need to do. We're going to think about for mobile design. So from day one, when we got together after Professor Filati left, right? You know, she's gone, right? So now I've got this second half of the course. I started getting you to use this meta tag, this Viewport Meta Tag, and the reason why is because there are tons of devices out there that use that are mobile devices or handheld devices, and a lot of the way we consume information on the web these days is through mobile devices, right? So that's why I got you to include the meta tag, the Viewport Meta Tag, inside your web browser as we begin, right? So as soon as we got together. That's kind of, you require this, so it kind of initially scales the device. It tells the browser how to scale the device from this kind of idea here on the side to something like this. So it kind of matches the size of the incoming browser. We also used, last week we used this tel tag to actually use when we created our address. So when we click on the telephone link, it actually dials from your mobile phone. This is cool. There's also the SMS tag. that allows you to do the same thing, but just in a mobile a message. Not as widely as used lately. Definitely, this is used more often. Not often used, to connect you with your messaging center or whatever you're using. iMessage as an example on the iPhone, or even sending out something like a text. Typically not done on a website. Sometimes they might have a need for this. As an example, if you want to text somebody for support, very rare, as you don't want to give out kind of a mobile number. So let's talk about responsive design a little bit more. Again, the term was kind of made by this guy Ethan Marcotte. He was the guy that kind of talked about responsive design and why do we call it responsive anyway? We call it responsive because your website responds to various viewports that try to access the data that it contains, and it's going to change its display in terms of the way the links are displayed. The content that's displayed on the website also changes in terms of its size, the width, and the layout. Everything changes in response to the type of device, and it's not just kind of reflowing the content like we've been doing so far, but also just kind of thinking about, should I have a larger button on smaller devices? Like Apple's standards are, the button should be at minimum at 44 by 44 pixels, like a square, at least that size. Anything less than that is really unclickable, is what they say, right? So Apple's got these, hardware recommendations or best practices that they require for when you create mobile apps, and I think they've got the right idea when it comes to their particular user story. So again, some techniques: fluid layout. We can use percentages instead of pixels, right? We want to try and do that, as well as M's for the size of our fonts. So where kind of when we resize our layout, our font sizes change as well. Especially if someone on the browser increases the size of your screen by increasing the zoom and so on, or pinching and zooming on a mobile device, you want to make fonts that rescale a little nicer. The other thing is flexible images, and the idea of flexible images is actually you don't want your images to be fixed width. That's bad, right? Because obviously we want to scale our image to fit our screens or any other kind of devices, right? So, and then the one I'm going to talk about today a lot is CSS3 media queries, which is kind of the main way we do responsive design. So what are CSS3 media queries? There's two ways to use them. All right, we're going to talk about them today, right? So this is the main thing we're going to talk about. One is this idea of creating a link that says, hey, here's our Lighthouse Mobile.css, and it's only going to be, we only want to make it available for the screen and a maximum device width of 480 pixels. So use this CSS when this condition exists. That's what we're saying, right? That's one methodology. So if you want a separate document, today I'm going to do it where it's embedded. So I'm going to say something like this. Inside your CSS document, you're going to use the @media tag. That's what you're going to use. And what it does is it creates an outer code block, right? So it says, hey, when the media, only for the screen, and you can, by the way, you can also target only print if you want to do it for print. I want to change my style for anything that's on the screen that has a maximum width of 480 pixels, so that it uses this kind of header instead of other kind of headers. So I can kind of embed or nest my styles within this section that basically detects the kind of media that I'm using, which is really cool. So that allows us to kind of detect to see how big our screen size is, right? And that's why we use this meta tag way up here, right? We use this meta tag to say, hey, how big is our screen size? Oh yeah? It's 480 pixels or 320 pixels. Well, that means, you know what, that we're going to use this CSS as opposed to this other CSS, right? That's what CSS media queries allow us to do. And it's the main technique that we use to adjust our layout, nowadays. And by the way, this doesn't require any JavaScript, so there's no JavaScript required here. It's just pure CSS that is going to allow us to do this. Okay. I also want to point you to some other things. We're going to scratch the surface with CSS here today. like with responsive design. I can't do a full responsive design kind of lesson, within one day. It's just impossible, right? Like there's just too much to cover. But we're going to scratch the surface so you've heard the term responsive design. And I'm going to create a boilerplate document with you today that you're going to save and you can use over and over again as we go forward instead of you creating stuff from scratch, right? But one thing I'd like you to direct you to is there's two main frameworks that use responsive design. One of them is Foundation 5, right? Foundation by Zurb organization. This is the one that you could certainly download if you're gonna be a web designer today and you wanted to use Foundation. It's a very popular framework, and what it does, it kind of allows you to use CSS3. It uses CSS3 media queries with some JavaScript to create responsive websites, right? So that's really cool. It's free to download, and they call it the most advanced responsive front-end framework available. If you go to Learn and Develop, there's videos, there's training, there's all kinds of stuff on here to support you to learn Foundation. Definitely one of the most popular and most robust frameworks for responsive design. The other one that's probably even more popular is Bootstrap, right? Bootstrap is the de facto standard nowadays for responsive design. And we're going to be talking about Bootstrap a little bit together here today. And how can we mimic some of the styles that Bootstrap gives us, right, when it comes to responsive web design, right? Again, Bootstrap uses they have their CSS3 library that basically takes a website and styles it for us, so we don't have to create our CSS or try and think about the CSS ourselves. It's kind of a neat little framework. Originally called Twitter Bootstrap, it's definitely one of the frameworks that you should learn if you're looking at responsive design. By the way, I would say responsive design would be required nowadays as a method of creating all websites. If you create any website without responsive design, at least some form of responsiveness, something's wrong with your design methodology. Other ways of thinking about, instead of being responsive, is mobile first. And there's a couple of mobile first frameworks. And so it's not responsive. So maybe I want to make a mobile specific site. Well, there's jQuery Mobile. jQuery Mobile has a framework. So I go to jQueryMobile.com. And you can download this touch optimized framework that basically works specifically for handheld devices. So if you want to be very specific about the type of device, that's another option for you to go to try and use something like jQuery Mobile, as an example. There's also HTML5 boilerplate. If you go to HTML5boilerplate.com, right? It's also a front-end framework you can download, right, when you use your stuff. I'm just introducing these things to you. We're not going to really talk to it because we're going to do things from scratch. But if you really wanted to look at some like a boilerplate code that you can start from, you could certainly download this free Kickstarter to get you going with responsive design, right? So there's some really free stuff. There's also one more. The same people make an HTML5 mobile boilerplate, right? That's a mobile boilerplate. So specifically for mobile, it's mobile first again. Here it is. And mobile boilerplate, what it does is it allows you to again target mobile devices as opposed to be responsive. So there's two ways, two different ways of thinking. One is to be responsive, respond to various viewports, and reflow your content, right? The other one is to target devices, target mobile devices. And then, of course, there's the third way, which is hybrid, right? For tablet devices and desktop devices, reflow your content with responsive design. And then for handheld devices, make a mobile-specific site just for them. Right? So again, some strategies on how to do this. And again, the last one that I was talking about, this hybrid way, right, is definitely the middle path. The specific mobile-specific site, because you can make a tablet-specific website. You can make a mobile-specific, a handheld-specific website. You can make a desktop-specific website. That's really expensive because it means that each of your web pages has to be restyled for those sizes. Right? This way, this hybrid approach is kind of the best of both worlds, or the worst of both worlds, regardless of how you see it. But it gives the user the best experience. So again, there's different ways. We're not going to be able to talk about all these things. I'm just going to scratch the surface today. But I want to talk about how to reflow our basic layout so that it's responsive, and it gives us a little bit of this idea of responsivity. Okay, let's take a look at this now. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, let's go back on the Visual Studio side, right? I've pulled up this sample application, right? So instead of starting from scratch with you guys today, I've made this one called COMP213 boilerplate, right? If you want to find it and download it, and so you're on the same page as me, instead of starting from scratch, you can certainly go to GitHub. And if you don't know where my GitHub link is, you could always look up look me up on StudentWeb. So StudentWeb, FacultyWeb. Centennialcollege.ca, it's CILIOP, right? And then if you hit GitHub, right? When you go here, it'll open up the link for you that'll take you to my repositories, right? So again, I'm going from this website here to GitHub, and then from here, I'm going to my repositories. Okay, now, under my repository, if you look, there is this COMP213 boilerplate, right? Here it is. If you download this boilerplate, it gives you everything. You'll be at the same space or the same place that I am, right? Because I've got like some content in there, some basic CSS and stuff. And I'm going to be updating this thing today, but this is where we're going to start off. Okay, this boilerplate. Now, for those people watching the video, by the time you're going to see this video, we're going to have updated this boilerplate so it's complete, right, as much as possible, right? But for now, we're starting off with this piece right here. If you want to do it on your own, you could certainly create your own kind of like new file. So you can go File, Project, New Project, and start off by yourself and do it. Or you can just download and use mine to start off. So what have I included here? I've got a couple things. I got my reset CSS, just like we normally start off with. And I've also got my main CSS. And main CSS, if you notice, is everything that we had before with a couple of modifiers. One thing is, just to notice what I'm doing here, I'm using M's for my line height and my my font size, right? So what does this mean? If I run this thing, this is my little boilerplate that I've created. Right now you're not going to see anything because there's nothing there, right? What we need to do, and this is what I'm going to ask you to do, is if you join me, I'm going to add in some stuff inside the body tag that allows me to add some content. Like for now, there's nothing. There's no header section. There's nothing. So let's do it together. Okay, so that's the first thing we do when we make a header tag is we do this. We say header. I'm going to use my shortcuts here. So shortcut warning for those people who don't have Visual Studio Web Essentials. Header, and inside my header, I'm going to have a navbar, right? And remember, the nav tag is used for major navigation, right? So if you have like primary nav or even secondary nav, you want to use the nav tag. You don't have to, but that's what the specification tells us. It's for major navigation. So nav, and then we're going to make an ID. We're going to give nav an ID of primary nav. You can also use main nav if you want. All right. Inside my navigation, we're going to have an unordered list. An unordered list, and it's going to have a class. We're going to give it a class of menu content. Menu content. Follow me here. Inside my unordered list, you're going to have 5 list items, right? 5 list items. And inside my list items, I'm going to have an A tag, right? An anchor tag. Inside each anchor tag, you're going to have an href value with this pound sign or hashtag that's not going to take you anywhere. And at the end, you're going to also add in some link text. So I'm going to say link number $, and the $sign is going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you want to start with 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, you could put $2 signs, and it would start off with 0, 1, 0, 2, or 3 would start off as 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 2, 0, 0, 3. We were just going to use 1. And then I'm going to press tab. When I do that, I have the following. I'm just going to kind of stop debugging here for a second, and I'm going to unpin this so you can see it a little better and zoom in. Okay, so this is what we have so far. So our link tag, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of thing, our links. What we want to do with our links, definitely a couple things we want to put in. I know my first link is going to be the home link, so that's what I'm going to have in there. I'm not going to change the others because maybe in our boilerplate we're going to make it so that we use we're going to use this for other designs too, so that we're going to leave that alone, our home. You know, I also want to put some comments. And if you notice, I started up here with my author name, web app name, and so on. I might also want to put some comments in before we continue for the creation date. So here's our creation date. And we're going to use July 14th, 2015. You can use whatever creation date you want. This section here, if I want to add some comments, some HTML5 comments, again, you do them like this. So less than, exclamation mark with a double dash, and then whatever your comments are, and then a double dash and greater than sign. You remember your browser ignores comments, right? Just like it does in C#, just like it does, or your compiler does in other languages. And maybe we're going to call this our CSS section, right? So here's our CSS section. Okay, and then we have our primary nav, and sometimes we have so many nav headers and everything else, and different kinds of navs that I forget what it is. So you know what? I'm going to add another comment in here, and I'm going to make it so that it says primary nav. So I know where my primary nav ends. That's all I've done. So I'm kind of noticing what it is. And here's my menu content. This is my menu content. I'm going to do the same thing for my menu content. I'm just going to copy this class information, and I'm going to put in another comment that tells me where my menu content ends. All right, there it is. So menu content. So we know that this UL, our unordered list, has our menu content, and this is our primary navigation, right? And this is our header. Now all this has been pre-styled. If you remember from our main.css, this is just our main CSS from before, right? Okay, cool. Let's add in our content section. So some content. We're definitely going to use a div tag with a class of main content, right? Actually, we'll use an ID. We'll make an ID of main content. Okay, inside our main content, right? We want some kind of heading tag. I want to use an H2. You guys can certainly use H1 tags if you want as well. And my H2 tag is going to say, content heading. Beside the H2 tag, I'm going to have a P tag, a paragraph tag. And inside my paragraph tag, I'm going to have lorem ipsum text, so placeholder text of about 100 characters, or 100 words, I mean. And then I'll press tab. This is my text, main content. So again, just like really simple, kind of boilerplate for us, right? And underneath that, in the footer section, I'm going to add some other stuff. I'm going to have a footer, right? And inside my footer, I'm going to have an H4 tag. So another kind of heading tag, H4 tag. And my H4 tag, I'm going to have in there a copyright statement. So I'm going to say copyright 2015, right? There it is. And in my footer tag, next to my copyright statement, I'm going to put and copy. That gives me that copyright symbol, right? All right, so I've got my content here. Let's take a look. I'm going to run this thing and see how it looks. To test this thing out, looks like this. Okay, cool. If I reflow this thing, if I kind of move this thing from this size on down, I'm good here. But when I go here, I got a bit of an issue, right? Got a bit of an issue. Okay, if you notice, so I'm kind of going from here to here. My links all mash up here. Not happy with that. And I don't want that. What I want is when I come down to this point or whatever, I want it to change these links to go away and change into this little hamburger, right? This little button, right, that comes up. Yeah, it's called a hamburger, right? So, or some people call it a sandwich. Some people call it like a little link button or whatever you want to call it, or a menu button, right? So I want the menu button to come up, right, as opposed to all these links. These links don't make any sense, especially if I have other things there. Like especially if I go to 320 by 480. Hey, by the way, how do I know how big I am, how large my screen is here? How do I tell my resolution, right? Well, if I go to the hamburger on Chrome, right, and I go down to more tools, if you're using Chrome, and if I go to developer tools, right, I get this little section that comes up in the bottom. If I move this around now, take a look. Now I know I'm at 430 pixels. See the top right corner here, Take a look. Because I'm in developer mode, I can see how many pixels my screen is at. So I know that when I come down to here, I'm at approximately 328 pixels right here. Like basically, this is my size of my iPhone, approximately. Let's just say, right here, 328 pixels. And as I move forward up till about 480 pixels, so this is like, let's say some mobile phones allow you to go almost to 480 pixels, right? As an example, there it is right here. So this is the kind of the break point that goes between mobile and tablet. Anything greater than 480 pixels typically is a tablet, typically. If I go out to 768 pixels, right, 768, approximately there, that is the break point between a tablet and a larger screen. Let's say, for example, a small laptop, or older laptops, some older desktops, right? And then, of course, anything greater than 1400 pixels, when you go way over here, that's for large desktops and high-resolution laptops, right? So, different breakpoints that we can look at, we can target, we can use our CSS media queries to target, so that way we can restyle our page according to the size of our viewport, right? Okay, I want to do that here. So what I want to do is a couple things. I want to restyle my header, right? So that way, when I come here, let's help me out, guys. I want to come here. When I come here, I want to do two things. And by the way, when we do our mobile design, we always start with a small screen first, right? So we say, look, you know what? When we're this small, I want to wipe away my links. That's what I want to do. How do I do that? Okay. Well, let's take a look at that from a CSS problem perspective, right? Well, we know that I want to use my @media CSS media query. So let's start typing @media, right? And if I kind of go control, or if I start typing, now usually it says @media. If I say only screen, that means only my screen, right? And the size of my pixel. So I say width. If I say device width, it's different than width. And width, if I go width or min width or max width, I can say that. So let's say my maximum width, right, is 480 pixels. So if I do that, I'm saying devices that are smaller than 480 pixels, smaller devices. When that happens, I want my my menu content, right? Menu content, which is, if you notice, I've tagged. I kind of tricked you guys. I said this menu content right here. Here it is, in my UL. I want it to disappear. How do I do that? What's the command? What is my property that I need to use to make this menu content disappear? Display none, right? So that's what I'm going to use for main down here. So I'm going to say, I'm going to target it. I'm going to say main menu contents, not main content, menu content, right? Here's a new CSS. Remember, the CSS looks like it's layered or nested within this media query right here, right? Display none, right? Display none. Okay, cool. So let's take a look and see what that effect has. So I'm going to refresh my screen, and you know what? When I refresh, here it is. And when I kind of move in, right? When I go here, what would happen? How come it doesn't reflow my screen? How come it doesn't take it away? How come? It does. It is a class. So let's target that again, right? And I'll refresh. And then when I move slowly down here, it goes bam. It goes away, right? You see that? How when we're at 4, if I want to see how many pixels there are, if I go to more tools, developer tools, right? And if I resize my screen, I see that it's 477 pixels. And as I move forward, once I go beyond 480 pixels, take a look. Right? It kind of makes that menu appear, right? Otherwise, we have nothing, right? So what I want to happen is if I have less than 480 pixels, right, then here's my max width 480 pixels. I want to, with max width 480 pixels, display that little hamburger, right? That's what I want to do. I want my hamburger to be displayed. Okay. So what is this hamburger I speak of anyway, right? I'm talking about something that would come, it's inside my navigation bar already, right? That's hidden normally on the desktop size, right? So greater than 480 pixels or whatever. And yet it's available, or I can see it on the small screen, right? Okay. So there's a couple ways to do this. And one of the ways is I could create a span tag, right? Let's do this with the span tag. So we're going to say span, and my span tag, right, as an example, we're going to call this our menu button. Right? We're going to call this class, actually we'll make it a class of menu button. All right? And inside of our span tag with a class of menu button, we're going to have 3 other span tags, right? We're going to have a span tag, right, times 3, and each of these span tags is going to have a class of icon bar. Okay? It's going to look like this. Now, icon bars, you might say, well, they're spans. What are spans anyway? Anyone remember what spans are? Did you guys learn what spans are? They're just another type of container, right? If I wanted to look at the W3C specification for spans, I'm going to kind of go up here and look at that thing. Span tag. Why would you use such a thing? Why is it? What is a span tag anyway? Right? The W3C specification is a span element used to color a part of text. Definition is the span tag is used to group inline elements in a document, and the span tag provides no visual change by itself. It just allows us to target key elements, right? So if I want to target some elements, I can use a span tag. And the good way of doing that is if I want to make a certain span of text bold, right? I don't need to use strong. I can use span. If I want to give them a special colors as well as make them bold, or if I want to make them clickable, right? I can use a span tag for that. I don't have to use an anchor tag. Okay, anchor tags are cool and all, but they're not necessary to make something clickable. Okay, span tag is just another container. All right, so we've got this span tag, and inside the span tag we've got some other ones. And we're creating this kind of a container that has menu button. Okay, cool. I also want to, when we have this menu button, right, I want to be able to target my icon bar, right? And my icon bars are going to be very small. They're going to be little bars, right? And what I mean by that is we want to create this, pull up, this little icon bar that looks like this. Now there's 2 ways to do this. I could load up an image in my background that comes up, right, with CSS. Or I could use borders, right, some tricks. So there's nothing loaded, there's no image loaded up at all that draws this little thing here with borders and everything else. Okay, how do I do that? So now that I've got my span tag, here it is, right, this menu button, I want to show my menu button when the class, when I'm in a condition that I have maximum width of 480 pixels. But when I have a when my my screen size is bigger, I don't want to show it at all. I want nothing to do with it. I don't want to show my button. So how do I do that? Well, I'm programming it in here, right? I say, well, when it's less than 480 pixels, I want to say this. I want to say my menu button then, right? It's going to have some styling, right? One thing I want to have is, you know, as an example, I want to give it a little bit of border and size and so on. Like, I want to create almost like a size for this thing, right? So I can make my icon or my span as big as I want it. Like, for example, if I want to make it so that it's touchable, what did I say? 44 by 44 pixels would be the size that I want to make my button, right? So I could do that. I could say something like this. I could say my width, right, is 44 pixels. I could do that, so like a fixed width. I could also give my height. I could give my height 44 pixels for my button. Then I could add a border, right, which is 1 pixel solid white, let's say, because we're on a black background. Okay, so I've kind of designed my menu button that way. Okay, cool. Let's take a look and see how that would look if I, and by the way, I also want to make it so it's visible, right? So I want to say display block, right? Display block. Okay, what does that do for me with this thing? Can I actually make this work? Well, let's refresh. Here's my links, and as I go down, right, and I go down beyond this point, oh, there it is, right? So my button is there. Look, looks like a button, right? Now, you know what? It's kind of squarish, and I think I want to give rounded kind of corners, right? Because I think that, to me, it speaks to me about, you know, how it should look. I'm going to try and make it look like this, right? So I'm going to give a border radius of about 4 pixels, let's just say. And let's see what it looks like now. So I'm going to refresh and move down. And then it comes the kind of 4 pixels. Maybe 4 pixels is not enough. I want to make it even rounder than that. It's almost nice. Let's make it 5 pixels. Sorry. Just experimenting here with the size of my button. There it is. So 5 pixels, right? And I want to make this come up on the right-hand side. So how do I make it come up on the right-hand side? Well, I could do something like this. I could say float right. Gotta be careful, because what happens when I do floats, it kills my container, right? When I float right. Let's take a look. There's float right, right? So now, again, beyond this point, once I go beyond 480 pixels, it goes back to doing this, right? It goes back to this. Here's my button. Okay, I want to put the lines in there, right? My lines. So when my lines come up, I want to make it so that my my icon, which remember I made a class for icon bar, right? So I'm going to put that in there. Icon dash bar, right? My icon bars, that's the stuff that's inside my menu button, right? They're going to have a width of 22 pixels, right? For now, let's see if this works, and a height of we're going to make it a height of 2 pixels. I'm going to give him, between each item, I'm going to give a margin top, right, of approximately 4 pixels. And I'm also going to give, when I have a width and a height, I can also do a border, right? Each of the borders, right? Now remember, you got to think about this. Border is, 1 pixel solid white. That's what I'm going to make them as well, right? So, and maybe I'll do a border radius just to make them so they're a little rounded. Border radius of 2 pixels. Okay, we'll adjust this in a second. So there's some problems here. You're going to see what happens. We should see these things come up. Now this happens within our content. So let's take a look. So refresh. Well, yeah. See, they're all way over here, right? And why are they like this? Why are they kind of one on top of the other? To understand that, and again, our icon bar, right? If we display block for a second, right? And let's see what that looks like now. There's the lines, right? Take a look. See? Now, the thing is, if you notice, we have a border and we have 2 pixels inside of them, but we need some kind of background color, right? Background color would be really nice for our icon bars, right? So we got borders, and you know what? We want to kind of have a background color. I used to try and put my background color up here, so I would say background dash color, and we'll make this white. Again, it's just outlining what we normally see. We're almost there. We're close. It's not bad, right? Now we want to center these things. How do I center them? Well, each one of them has to have a margin. I already have margin, right? Margin top, 4 pixels. But I want, if we want to make them centered inside of our container, right, which I do, right, then what I do want to do is kind of do something like this. We know that the width is 22 pixels. Then I want my left and right, so top, right, bottom, left, right? So I want my my right and left to be auto. So if I do that, it's not going to be the effect we want, but it'll be closer, right? And it'll do one of those, right? How come? Well, because then I add a margin top of and a margin bottom of 4 pixels, which is not what I want. What I really want is for it to be centered, kind of in this, in the center of the screen, right? The other thing to note is, I mean, I got to be careful with this float stuff, right? Because I'm floating this whole thing to the right, right? And if I want to see my radius, if I want to see what my menu button, my, kind of a border, I already have the idea of what my border is containing. So it does contain these things, right? If I go to, go take this 4 pixels away, so if I go to 4 pixel, auto to the right, right, 0 below, and auto to the left, right, just to give you that idea, because we want to center this stuff. Again, we're going to think about how this looks, right? It gives us this weird spacing, because I've used auto margins for that, right? We don't have a lot of space there, right? And we've also specified a width of 22 pixels, right? So we got to be very careful when we do 22 pixels as an example, and we add this auto, if you will, right? It gives us a specific exact measurement of what it's going to look like, right? So this isn't going to work. Margin top. We may need to add some padding around everything. Padding might work. We have to be very careful of how to do this, right? If I put margin top is the reason between margin between 2 different items, right? But I want to kind of add a little bit of padding to the left and padding to the right. And if from trial and error, if I go look at this again, let's go back to what it looks like here. Notice I want to push this, to the right. They're 22 pixels, and I have 40 pixel, size. So 22 minus 44 is 11, right? So I got 11 on each side, right? So I want to be maybe 10 pixels padding on the left, is probably what I want. Padding left, 11 pixels. I could also put a padding left, a margin left, because that means that between any other objects, a margin left of 22 pixels. So I go 0, 11 pixels, sorry, and then 0. See how that looks. Gotta be very careful how this looks. No? And the reason for this is because it crunches up. Each one of these things collapse when you give too many. Let's just drop this down to 8. And see what happens. Again, top, right. Right? Oh, and I should probably put this. How about them apples? Let's change that to top, instead of top to this. Hold on. And that kind of spaces it out too much to me. 4 pixels to the top, bottom 0, 8 pixels from the left, right? And then we still got, not much of a space, right, between each one of them. If I increase this or decrease this, if I go like to 4 pixels left margin, to show you what that does, it just scrunches those up. That's how it should look, right? So 4 and 4, so top, right, bottom. Oh, wait. That means I could probably do one of these, right? 4 pixels, 0. I could probably do one of those, right? That works okay. And then if I can do one of these, I should be able, if I do auto for top and bottom, right? It centers it that way. Now I got to push it down a little bit. So top, I think a little bit more from a top perspective. But when I do that, my margin it'll pull down all the other stuff around it as well. So I got to be careful. And this is where I would add padding a little bit as well. So if I go padding, if I go padding top only, just to give you an idea of, let's say, 5 pixels. So I get that. That makes them really thick. I don't want that. That looks like a fat hamburger, right? We don't want fat hamburgers like this, right? That's within, remember, between my content and my border, right? So padding is definitely something we do not want, right? How about padding within my menu button itself? Like inside the menu button, between the border and everything else, we want a padding of approximately 5 pixels. Now that'll add to my border, to my radius, right? So I gotta be careful here. So if I go padding all around 5 pixels, and that's cool. That'll push us down. That'll eat some of this margin between everything else. Let's take a look, right? And it also makes this a bigger object, right? I'll take that away and I'll show you what I'm talking about now. So if I take padding away, all right, so there's no padding, and I refresh, take a look at this. This is when I added 4 pixels. This is when I take it away. So 4 pixel padding actually expands my object. So I don't want to add too much in there. Even 4 pixels is too much. Maybe even less than 5 pixels padding. I don't have a lot. Remember, I got 44 pixel width. And if I add 5 pixel padding in the inside, right, it'll expand because of the way my display object is. It'll expand to fit or shrink wrap my object, right? So let's add like 1 pixel and see what it does. If I go 1 pixel at a time, still increases the size of this. I want to push this down, right, this object, but just the content that's in here. We're close. Anyway, the idea is we're fairly close to getting our height and the way we want it to look. Very, very close. Right? Actually, we're in line with making it work so that way when, I mean, it's not quite as big. I could probably chop a little bit from our height. So instead of our height being 44 pixels, let's cut it down a little bit, see if that works. Let's go up to 30 pixels. That's probably pretty good. What do you think? So if I go here, I got my little icon bar that I've custom made, right? And I made it purely with CSS, right? We don't have any kind of other things. One thing I do want to add in, I want to use focus. Have you guys ever done like any kind of drop-down navigation at all? All right, so we're going to probably handle that later on. But one of the things for drop-down navigation is you want to be able to focus on this item, to click on it. In order for us to focus, if I press my tab button, I don't have nothing can get focused right now because there's no navigation. This isn't an A-link, an A tag. So the trick that we use to get navigation to have to this menu button here to have focus is to give it a tab index. So we're going to say tab index 0. Tab index says now we can focus on it. If I refresh and if I say tab, right, you see how it gains focus, that little highlight, right? It becomes blue, right? Let me show you that again. Watch. See, it's white. I click tab, bam, it's blue. It can gain focus. Gaining focus allows us to click onto it because clicking onto it actually gives us focus as well, right? All right. Now that we do this, we can add in another class, another pseudo class for our menu button, right? This is pure CSS again, right? Menu button. And what we're going to do is we're going to say when it gets focus, right? When it gets focus, we want 2 things to happen. One, we want the background color to change to, let's say this, a different kind of like a gray color. Let's say this, I'm just going to pick one here. Like a dark gray. If you put dark gray, it'll work. Let's see that. And also what I want to do is when we not just gain focus, but when we're also hovering over it, right, we want this dark color to come up, right? So when we hover over or we focus, I want to get this menu button when you hover over it, or when you I gotta put the dot in there. When you hover over it or when you gain focus, I want you to have this dark gray color. All right, so let's see how that works. So we're refreshing, and then when we hover over it, look at that dark gray color. Huh? Look, 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 almost like a little hover effect for a little button, right? And if we click onto it, it also gains focus. See how I clicked onto it and it's good? That means that I can click onto it. If I can click onto it, I can show, if I click away, I can show or hide my menu, right? But I want to show my menu, right, only when, and this is where the funky code comes into play, only when I click onto it, right? And only when I'm in 480 pixels or smaller. I don't want the icon bar being shown any other time, right? So we're going to do this. We're going to say menu button, right? And we're going to say focus. When the menu button focused, then this little squiggly line, right? We're going to say our menu content, right? Stuff that's in our menu content, right? We're going to say our, remember here, this is our, we have our nav UL, we have our nav UL LI, and what we said here was, hey, guess what? When we are in this size, our menu content is going to be display none, right? Menu content is display none. What we're going to say is our menu content, right, is going to display block. Let's see how that looks. If it works, if we've got it correct, right, then when I refresh and I click onto it, I can see my menu content. If I click away, it goes away. See, menu content, almost there, right? It kind of comes up as a block. This is cool, but that's not really what I want, right? My menu content to display block, but I also want, to copy this line, I also want on focus, right, my nav UL LI, right, which is this piece, right? So I'm going to grab this, oops, I'm going to grab this piece right here where it says inline. Grab all this. So I don't want to actually go here. I just want to just replace this. Sorry, just do one of these. I want my nav UL LI, right? I don't care about the padding, to display block as well. Now it's going to display block, but because it's hidden within my menu content, it won't display, right? So I want it to display block. Okay, now let's see what this means. Nav UL LI display block. If I refresh, right, and I click onto it, it displays block like this way, right? Which is what I want. But what I want this to do is see how this whole thing, right, there's no color at all, right? And I want this home button to come down. What do I need to do to my nav UL LI? First of all, let's do a couple things here. I want my nav UL LI, my list items, each to have a border. Let's make them of 1 pixel, just for troubleshooting. 1 pixel solid white. Right? Let's see what they look like, just to see for our troubleshooting purposes. We'll refresh and click onto it. That's what it looks like right now, right? That's our UL, our nav UL, our list items in our nav are there, right? So that's cool. I mean, I want my list items to kind of appear almost in this list. If I click onto this, I kind of have a bunch of links that I can click in this way, right? Okay, cool. I also want, and maybe, again, maybe 1 pixel solid. Maybe I don't want that for now, but I don't mind if it's that way. I'm just programming it. You can program it in any color you want, right? I also want the UL itself, the unordered list, and I'll put that on top of here, my nav UL, right? my nav UL, because I only have one nav right now, so I can do this. If I wanted to specify only the nav that's my main nav, main navigation, my UL within my main, my primary nav, as an example, I could use that class selector, right? But in here, what I want to put in is kind of, let's put a border to see this too. So here's my border of my 1 pixel solid red, just so that it looks really ugly so we can see what it looks like. So I'm going to refresh, I'm going to go here, click. And if you notice, my red border is the same size, this is cool, as my containing elements, right? Which is kind of cool too, right? There it is. So that means if I add margin to the top of my UL, right, it'll push all this down. I know this, I made this thing about 30 pixels, right? This thing here. So if I add 30 pixel margin, it's going to push this to the bottom. So maybe we'll add 32 pixel margin on the top of this, of our UL. Let's show you what I'm talking about. So I can take my border away, and in here I'll say margin top 32 pixels. I'm just guessing 32 is right. We may have to adjust that. Let's refresh and click. And now, yeah, it's not quite enough. I think maybe we have to add a few more pixels of margin so that the home button is pressed below. All right. Okay, so we're going to say margin top maybe 35 pixels to give us a little bit more. And again, refresh, click onto it. Almost there, maybe a little bit more. I want it just below, so I want to be able to see the items. Say 40 pixels. There we go, 40 pixels. This is good. And now when I hover, see this hover effect that I got going on. This hover effect worked okay, right, from a link perspective, right? But I want my home link, my active link, to be always on, right? Now, if I'm not wrong, on my index.html, I didn't put an active link on here. Let's do that. So let's say my active link, from my active link, we're going to put my class of active. There we go, class of active. It could be, you know what, I made it called active. You can call it current. You know, there's a lot of things of the way of kind of pointing out which one is current or active. And if I refresh and click on there, I can see that my home button is kind of is clicked. Now, not a lot of really cool things there for my active class. And you know what? When I expand this thing, so if I go up to here, see how it disappears? But if I go back, see how it comes on again? Right? Because I've got this thing primed. It's clicked, right? If I click away, it goes away, right? If I kind of go in here, and I kind of go back, right? Click onto it, shows me my links. Otherwise, it hides them. So pretty cool stuff with no JavaScript, right? Like this is like how we're doing it. So we can actually create a button effect. Now this little hover effect that I've got going on with when I add text decoration as I hover over them, meh, I don't like it, right? So how do I change the text decoration when I kind of go over? I don't want to just hover over them. Well, the way to do that is, of course, to see, we're almost done, to see the, I do some, if I go back to my nav UL, here's my nav, right? And if I want to look at my unordered list items, and if I want to see, let's just add a border for us to troubleshoot. So we'll say for our nav UL LIs, we'll add a border, right, of 1 pixel dashed red, so we can see what it looks like just for troubleshooting. And if I refresh, there's what they look like, right? So this is how you can see how there's a bit of margin top and margin bottom on these things, right? This is where the link items, and it looks to me like there's a little bit of spacing between each of these links. So, which is kind of cool. I mean, that they have a little bit of margin between them, right? Let's take a look here, going back. So each ULLI has 5 pixel padding between them, right? That's one thing to note, right? So 1 pixel padding, right? Or 5 pixels padding, right? But if you notice also that the nav UL, I haven't told it any kind of padding. There's no padding around my nav UL, right? So I haven't said, hey, give me on my unordered list itself a little bit of padding or margin or anything, right? I just said text align right. So let's see what that looks like. So I'll add a border of 1 pixel dashed. We'll make it yellow so we know we can differentiate between the UL and the LI. Yellow is the UL and red is the LI. And we'll be able to see the difference between one and the other. So there it is. So you see that there's a bit of, and you can see how, if you click carefully, how our links, right, the actual list items kind of fall outside of the UL tag, right? Well, how do I fix this, right? I could add overflow. I could do that. I could add padding around my object. That's another thing I could do. So if I go back in here in my UL and I say, well, between my content and my border, right, I want a padding, let's say, of a few pixels. So padding all the way around of 5 pixels. Now take a look. This is the yellow border, right? Yellow border. So if I refresh, it gives me a little bit of a thicker border around everything, right? And in my Navbar itself, right? Now this is it encompasses, by the way, if you notice, it encompasses my links, right, nicely. So actually my links are highlighted, right? But I want to make it so that my link, my actual list item, right, is as big as my bar, right? I want to kind of make it, even this part here, I don't want to have any border or any margin or padding between my UL and my nav. I don't want that. I want it to be one, right? So going back to the drawing board, my padding is 10 pixels all around. I want to take that away, right? I want to go back and refresh, and now it's like this. And now what I'm going to do is, to make this even more pronounced, is I'm going to, because I want to make a thicker bar than this. Remember, my other bar will thicken compared to everything else. The container will swell or stretch to fit everything that's inside of it, right? Especially with an overflow of auto. Right? That's what it's going to do. So I've got my padding of 5 pixels around my UL, right? I think I'm going to add a padding of 10 pixels now to make it even bigger. If I make it so that if I keep this back at 5, right, or I make this padding 0, and I increase my unordered list size, let's just take this away to show you the difference. Here's I'm going to take this padding away from my unordered list and add it to the top and bottom of my list items, but I don't want any sides. I want my sides to be 0, and I want my top and bottom to be like 10 pixels or 15 pixels. It would be like this, 15 pixels with a 0 right and left. I don't want my right and left. I want them to kind of butt against each other, right? See, I don't get much. I get a bit of a menu kind of drop here because of overflow. That's not good. One good thing is that they're now they're kind of next to each other. There's no padding between them, right? It's a 0 pixel padding. The other thing is my display is inline. Let's change this to this inline block, which actually is kind of not supported on older browsers, i.e. 6 and 7, and I think will not support it. But you know what? I don't care, right? For i.e. 6 and 7. Let's see what happens if I make it inline block for a second. Refresh. Does this, right? Which is what I wanted instead of inline. I used inline block, right? So take a look. Inline block display. Okay, so there's my links 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? I don't have any margin between them, but the only thing that stays between them, that little bit there. And again, there's different kind of containers that are at play here. So 15 pixel 0. I got my one border, my UL, that gives me that dashed look that I want to put in there. And there's also a one border dash, which actually does affect my box model a little bit, because it offsets it by about 1 pixel on both sides, right? So that's why I'm getting that really weird kind of effect, right? Now I do want my UL to have a border right. I mean, even though it's a butted right, I don't want it to be exactly right to the right. I want to kind of push it in just a little bit to have my link start just a little bit to the left. So maybe like 10 pixels or 15 pixels, a little bit of padding on the right for my UL. So I'm going to put in some padding to the right, again, of about 15 pixels. Again, all I'm doing is aligning my how it looks right now. Now this is going to affect everything else, so beware of what I'm doing here. All right, so if I refresh, I get a bit of margin, and now what I do is when I hover over them, see how I get this link here? I want my whole UL or my whole list item to have a background color, right? And I want to switch out my my link so it's not this bright. I'll show you how that works. I want to kind of get that dark gray color in the background. All right, so how do I do that? So we do it on hover. Instead of text decoration being underlined, I want to get rid of that. And I want to say that my background color is going to be dark gray. Right, dark. Background color is, I'm just going to pick dark gray. I just didn't spell it properly. All right, so whenever I hover over, my whole UL list item is dark gray. Right? Let's take a look at that. So just the actual link. Let's see how that looks. Well, that's just this, right? And that's a silly thing. I don't want that to happen, right? Now remember, you don't have to put the hover element on the link, right? Because by the way, if I do this, watch, and I go here, and I go this, it does the same thing. I don't want that, right? We're going to fix this now when it comes into play. I don't want this to hover. I want the whole thing to go, right? So in order for me to make the whole thing, I'm not going to do my ULLIA hover. I want to hover on my list item, right? So when I hover on my list item, then I get the background gray, right? Fresh. So one of those kind of things, right? So I can hover. That kind of looks weird now, eh? When I look at the margin between my, or how wide my the width is, you see the width is kind of, it's not uniform, right? Because my link text is different sizes. It's going to kind of accomplish or wrap my link text, and there's a bit of a space on the right side. If I actually go zoom in here for a second just to show you what this looks like now, this is a problem. Now this does this. This is good. This is what I wanted on this side. There is this stupid border there, so I added this like 15 pixel margin, and you know what? I don't like it anymore. I think we're going to take it away. So here's my list item for padding top and bottom, and this is my padding right. I think we're going to take that away. Again, we're coding this from scratch, right? So let's refresh. And that's better. You know what? I do want the size of my block to be a little bit bigger to accommodate this 22 pixels or 44 pixels or 30 pixels, whatever we have here, because it's not quite big enough to do that, which means we need more padding top and bottom, right? Padding top and bottom of our UL. I'm not giving any padding left and right for now. Don't say, I'm not going to tell you I'm not going to give any padding eventually. I will. But for now, I don't want any padding. I want to go here and make this even more pronounced because that's 15 and 15 is not quite enough. I probably need something like 20 on both sides, right? Let's make it 20. And now we have this, right? Not quite enough still. Should be. And of course, I mean, you know, again, we're increasing the size of this, the UL, the list items to 20. If I go even more to 25, does the unordered list kind of change? Now think about this, what's happening. My unordered list is containing my list items, and I can make this as big as I want, right? See how they just stretched? but I'm not happy. Just don't worry about how they look right now. I'm still trying to figure out the sizing. If I go here, right, see how it crunches in from here to this, because this size, right, looks okay, right? Maybe it's too big. So we'll go back to 15 pixels. Sorry. And I'm going to go down here where we have our code for this. Margin top is UL, and we want to kind of, we've stripped out some of the other stuff when we defined some of the stuff we're doing up here, right? Let me just take away these borders. We don't need them anymore. We can kind of see where it's going. This is starting to make me crazy. But what I want to do is this ULLI is 15 pixels, right? And yet we don't have a lot of space, like our UL tag isn't really wrapping our content, right? So for me, what I want to do, again, is I want to kind of go do an overflow auto for this as well. And when I do that, refresh, it looks like this. And when I kind of come into here, it looks like this. We still need, you know what, I'm not happy with this how it wraps. I want it to be even bigger than this. And it's like when it's here, when we're in the 480 pixels range, our UL just basically just wraps this content. That's not really the effect I wanted. I want this, because remember, this is in pixels, and this is trying to fit what I've got in here, which is cool. I want to increase the size here. So what I want to do is I want to give a little bit of padding or margin around my menu button, but just top and bottom margin. I don't want really right and left. Let me take a look. Okay, maybe a little bit of right and left too. So I want to kind of do for my menu button itself, the whole menu button, not just the thing. I want to give margin, right, of about, let's say, we'll start off with 5 pixels. So not a lot of margin, and we're looking at a very small size screen. And let's refresh. There we go. I think it looks a little better for me. And then, now this is bad. Now the reason why it does this, we have to understand why it does this, right, is because we're overflowing our content, and I want this part here, this little menu, right? Now this is where I'm going to probably make my menu relative. Remember we talked about relative positioning? I want to make my menu relative inside my same block, but I want to push it over like 30 pixels to the right. So from the left, I'm going to make my position relative. Take a look. And you're going to see what this does, obviously, right? So if I want to do that, if I go down here, so my UL, right, is margin top, but I want to make my whole menu itself, my position is going to be, my position for the UL is going to be relative, and I'm going to say left like 30 pixels from the container. Let's see how that looks. 30 might be too much, but we'll see how it looks. Maybe not enough, a little bit more. And don't worry about this right now, because I'm going to add right and left. The reason why there's nothing on the right here is because there is no, I haven't added right and left padding whatsoever. But I think this is about right. If I push this over just a little bit more, so instead of 30, you know, I'm giving the effect of what this is going to look like. Maybe 40. Let's try that out. Might be too much. I might have to cut it back 5 pixels or so. That's good. So 40 is good, right? Because it kind of goes right under here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the margin on the right. Take a look, margin right. I'm going to increase margin right by about, I'm going to say about 10 pixels. What do you think? Or not margin, it would be padding right. Okay, so, and that would be done not here, right? I could do it here in my list items, right? But I'd probably want to do it all over because I think my margins or my padding is a little bit too tight, even for my regular nav. So here's my list items where I've got right and left 15 pixels, and I want right and left margin about, let's say I want to put all the way around 15 pixels and see if that works. And refresh and pull it over. That looks a lot better, right? Look how nice that is, right? And you know what? We have a problem. We have a problem because when I hover over this active link, my active link doesn't look active anymore, right? I don't want it to hover like this. Okay, so I got to fix that problem. That's one of them. And then what I want to do is, as I scrunch in here and I kind of do this, right? This is good, but I still want more over here on the right. And you know what? This UL, right? I think what I wanted to do is I want to say width is, I want to increase my width to 100%. So I want the UL tag to go right to the edge, right? And let's see if that helps. Maybe that'll kill our relative positioning a little bit. So if I go, because I want it to be the whole width, right? Makes sense? Maybe that'll fix my issue, but let's just see how it goes. So if I go nav UL, if I take this away for a second, I go width. This is only in, by the way, this is in the bottom part where I'm doing my media query. Width is 100%. Let's see how it looks now. That's better. There we go. That's my effect. That's the effect that I want. Right, so kind of a nice little menu that comes up, right? I do want my home button to be aligned properly. So when I click on my home button shows active, right? Because that's my home. So when I'm here, when I'm here, I want my home button to have kind of a darker gray, outline when it's active. So instead of this underline, because that underline is meh, I don't like it anymore, right? That was how we did it before. Now we're improving our design. So I'm going to go here to, my browser just crashed. I want to go here to my active link where it says text decoration underline. And my class, what I really want to do with my active link is, and again, it's applied to whatever my link is. And let's see, what is my link applied to? It's on my A tag that I'm applying my active link. I got to be very careful here, right? So anything that I have an active link on, I think this is cool, but I think I'd rather put it on my list item, not my, so I can apply my active class anywhere. So I'm going to take this off of this. I'm going to put it on my list item, right? This is my active link. That means my link, my list item itself, I want that, because that's what I'm coloring, I want that to be a dark gray, right? Okay, let's take a look at that. So I'm going to kind of save this off, go back here, and now I want to go my background color, right? And I want it to be gray, right? But I want it to be a darker gray than this. So I think this is the right color, gray, right? And again, I'm picking these kind of, standard colors. You can certainly pick whatever color you like for your scheme. If you don't like gray and black, I'm using a gray, black, and white theme. Refresh. And of course I have to run how about if I run the application? How about that happens? Now that it crashed. Okay, so I see my home button, but what happens is when I click onto it, it gives the illusion that you can click onto this and this would go, and I don't want it to be on this thing. I don't want you to hover over my home button, right? I want you to, when it comes to this first child, right? I don't want my first child of my list items, right, to be affected by my hover. I want it to be back to this gray all the time, right? And by the way, this gray color, this active, works here too, right? Because it shows me my home button is active. So I'm kind of, specifying my navigation here a little bit. So that means that it can't just be my hover. A hover works okay, but when I hover over my first item, my first child, right? So it's going to be my first child of my UL, right? If I hover over that, it's going to have this gray color again. So it's just not going to show anything. So let's try this out. So I'm going to say nav UL, UL, I'll say first child, right? Right? And then if I go li hover, right, this is where the first child I'm looking at. And by the way, I think it's something like this. I got to remember the exact syntax. Saying, so look at the first child and the unordered list, and then if it's a list item, and if you're hovering over it, then it's gray. The same color as this, so it kind of gives the illusion of only for the first item, right? That it's gray. but that's only for my home button. What if I'm on my active button? So if I'm hovering over my active button is what I really want to say, right? So if my active class, if my list item is active and I'm hovering over my active class, right, then I want my color to be gray. That's what I really want to say. So let's try to recode that again. That's not quite what I want. I want when, not just when I'm active, but also when I'm hovering over active. So active, and if I hover over it, right, active hover, it's also gray. Let's see that. Sorry, I'm just trying to think this through. So if I hover over it, see no difference, see? There's no difference. I can't tell that I'm hovering over it. But here I give a different color. Here I don't, because it's active, right? It's already active, so why am I going to color it? The other thing is my hand, my cursor, right, also changes. I don't want it, so I don't want it to look like a link, because my hand changes if I'm hovering over a link, right? I don't want that to happen, right? I want my cursor to be the default cursor, right? So how do I do that? Well, when I hover over it, or when it's active, my cursor, if I start typing cursor, right, is going to be default. Let's try that out. So when I hover over it, well, that didn't quite work. Yeah, that's not what I wanted. It's something cursor. It's not. So when I want to change my cursor, I don't know if it's active cursor or something cursor. Let's take a look. I forget. I do. W3C. W3 schools. I go there a lot when I do my stuff. I want to kind of go CSS cursor. Cursor property, change the cursor, cursor auto, cursor crosshair. That's the style. I was right, right? So when I hover over it, maybe when I hover over it, so it's when I hover the cursor style, when I hover over the link item, the AA tag, right? I'll be okay, because this is on a span, and I want to hover over an A tag. Right, so otherwise I get that really weird effect. So that's why it won't work. So it won't just be, it's anything that has an active class with an A tag inside of it. Active A tag hover. Then what I want is my cursor to be default. I think that's the way we do it. And refresh, and that's it. See? Oh, there's now, it doesn't change color anymore, right? It doesn't change my hand, doesn't change from my hand to my, it just back to normal, right? So now when I scrunch it up, right, I have the same effect. I have, it doesn't turn colors. I have this kind of thing happen here, right? I can select my link, and I have a fully responsive kind of navigation. So I think this is where I want to stop. For this piece, we've got our navigation, and now I want to show you how to do I want to use this as our default, or if you will, our boilerplate. So whenever we start a project, we'll start with this navigation that also provides a little bit of responsive design when it comes to how we scrunch things up, and we'll add to this as we go, right? So one thing I want to do here before we just pause for a break is I'm going to stop debugging. And I'm going to go to my Solution Explorer. I'm going to pin this thing. And I'm going to go into my Team Explorer. And for those people watching on YouTube, make sure there's no on-track files, I'm going to create a responsive Navbar, right? And commit. And then I'm going to go home and unsync commits. And it's going to sync. And if I go to my GitHub, which is here, and refresh, then you can see that it's updated. So you guys have it online if you want to get the code if you couldn't follow along, if I went too quickly. But really what we did here in a nutshell for this section is we created a responsive navbar that hides and shows without any JavaScript, which is what we wanted to do, to get kind of that feeling of mobile touch devices, you know, to give them a different kind of feel or interactivity compared to what we do, you know, with desktops. And that's it for this movie. When we come back, we're going to do some more stuff on, we're going to start forms.